Harry in the thrall of the cult of Meghan Markle. Hello everyone, welcome to Royal News Network. My name is Brittany, and today we are talking about this latest article, or I guess interview that we've gotten, this time from the Telegraph. And the woman who interviewed Harry also put up the entire transcript of their interview, or at least the one that they're publicly revealing, on her Substack. And I've read through it, and I'm convinced now more than ever is that Prince Harry is fully in the cult of Meghan Markle. He is fully in the thrall of her. He thinks she has done nothing wrong, that they've done nothing wrong. And he's also really, I think, in a cultish way, also really invested in, I would call it psychopathy or pseudo-psychology, because he said the greatest revelation that he's come to and the way he's dealt with the grief of his mother's death the best is through psychedelics. And while I'm sure those could somewhat be useful in perhaps a psychological setting, at the same time, I feel like though it's a cop-out. Instead of actually dealing with the grief head on and actually going through and managing it, instead it's like, I'm just gonna have a trip, see my truth, whatever that happens to be at the time, because, you know, I'm high. So whatever the truth is, obviously, that's the truth my mother is giving me. And that is what allowed him to manage his mother's death. And I feel like, A, that's a terrible thing to tell young people to do, is to take a drug like that, and try to get through whatever issue they're dealing with. And B, it just doesn't seem like he's fully still dealing with it. And yet he wants to pull the whole royal family onto this pseudo-psychology trip where Meghan Markle is the bearer of all truth and that she is the greatest of all time and they should just listen to every word she says. That's what I feel like Harry really wants at the end of the day, because he is fully invested in Meghan Markle in a way that I feel like is perhaps both unhealthy and really unrealistic. Because at some point, what happens with cults generally is usually sometimes they end badly, but also I feel like people who go into it sometimes come out more broken than they did when they came in. Now, granted, obviously Harry and Meghan aren't planning anything near what some other cults have done. What I'm saying though is that some of what Harry is saying really resonates with me with episodes and documentaries of cults that I've watched and how people get into this. They're looking for enlightenment. They're looking for truth. They're looking for hope. And this person, whoever is in charge of this group, tends to give that to them. And then they invest fully in that. But it usually doesn't go very well. And sometimes it can end really disastrously. And that's what I feel like the path Harry is heading down. So I'm going to share with you guys some of the clips from that interview, and I will let you guys know what I think and my opinion is. I always preface this with, I will read directly from the article, and I usually will also say just my opinion, just because if I say something, for example, that is my supposition rather than something I know and I'm reporting it to you, that's legally tricky water. So just to give you guys an FYI on that. But if you guys haven't been here to Royal News Network before, like I said, my name is Brittany, and on this channel I provide compelling royal commentary about the latest news and sometimes a little bit gossip too. I will be reviewing television shows and movies and sharing a bit about history as well. So if you guys want to subscribe, that would be awesome. I also have a trip to the UK planned and only a couple spots left. And I also have a fashion channel, which I'm thinking of changing the name of, just FYI. And I'm a little bit behind on that one, and I'm trying to get myself caught up. I'm doing a lot of different things. I'm trying different things, and that sometimes takes more time than I thought. And then I'm trying to do all this with Harry, and it's so much. And I do have the spare book. I have a digital copy somebody gave to me, and so I will be working through that this week. And I have a couple ideas of maybe what I'll do, but I'll let you guys know as soon as I confirm, and if the idea I have works or doesn't work, or is it going to take too much time, but I will let you guys know. So why am I using the terminology cult? Because obviously Harry and Meghan, they're not trying to start a cult. They're really not, as far as I'm aware. I think they are trying to find followers and people who are deeply, deeply invested in them and their work, but they're not really trying to establish something like NXIVM or Scientology or anything like that. But they do want people to not only believe them, but spread their messaging, I feel like, in a lot of ways. Because Harry, especially in this one interview, he talks about how he really wants to take what he's learned through his therapy and take it over to the royal family, and that they wouldn't listen to him. And he needs to help protect his niece and nephew, the two spares, who he probably hasn't seen in a good 3 or 4 years. Let's be honest. He hasn't probably spent any time with those children at all. So this is the Wales' children. And he needs to go to them. And he needs to help them because he wasn't helped. And so he needs to help them. And so he's found enlightenment, and he needs to give it to the rest of his family because he knows what he's talking about. And not only that, because it goes above a level than that, but they need to listen to Meghan. They need to apologize to Meghan. They should institute Meghan basically as head of the Commonwealth. Now, I actually did a whole article about this, and I'll post it in the link down below. It was originally on my Substack, so if you guys want to go sign up, it's an easy way I can get a newsletter out per week just about general royal news, in addition to some of the videos I've done recently, both on the fashion channel and the main channel, and just a couple other things. And I really believe as we've gone through this, and this article again just confirms this, that Meghan really thought 100%, I believe, again, for legal reasons I say that she could be Queen of the Commonwealth. That William and Catherine, they can have stuffy, rainy old Britain. She doesn't care. She wanted the Commonwealth, because if you watch their documentary very closely, now they go through and they talk about how terrible the Commonwealth was. But then they also go through and talk about how great it was that Meghan was coming in, because she's a woman of color and she can come to these different communities and they can connect with her, because apparently the only reason you can connect with somebody is their skin tone. Other than that, I mean, Meghan, let's be honest, Meghan was raised in LA in an upper middle class neighborhood, most likely. She spent time on film sets. She was a privileged actress in Toronto. So this woman's concept of the struggles that people in sub-Saharan Africa go through, or people in India go through, is non-existent. Let's be totally honest. It's about as existent as it would be for Catherine. So with that out of the way, I feel like, again, there was this whole push to see Meghan as the savior, not only of the monarchy, but specifically the Commonwealth, that she could lead it. And that's why I think she put the flowers on her veil, which I always thought, when she said that she put the Commonwealth flowers down the line of her veil because she wanted to, it was a nice, thought to my future family. And I'm like, what? So go ahead and take a listen here.
The royal family to have all 53 of the Commonwealth countries incorporated, and I knew that it would be a fun surprise as well for my now husband, who didn't know. And I think the other members of the family had a similar reaction and just appreciation for the fact that we understand how important this is for us and the role that we play. And
okay, that made no sense. It makes no sense on the face of it that the royal family would be like, oh yes, we so appreciate that. Look, she cares about the Commonwealth. They're like, you live in England, right? And like the Commonwealth is not like a kingdom anymore. It's more of an association of countries that have similar trade agreements. That is what the Commonwealth is. It's a trade agreement at the base of it. At the heart of it, it's about trade. Because if you are, let's say, it'll come to me. If you are Jamaica, Belize, that's what I was looking for. If you are Belize, you want to trade with the UK. And if you don't have to pay as many tariffs, or if you don't have to pay any tariffs to trade with the UK, you want that agreement. So these Commonwealth countries aren't in the Commonwealth for the royal family. They're not there for Meghan Markle. They're there for the trade agreements. They're there for the history and the connections, and having that shared history that did intersect sometimes in very negative ways. But let's be honest as well, somebody was going to go around the world at some point and was going to go to different countries. And it just happened to be the Europeans. And part of the emphasis of that expansion that Europe did, not only was it looking for more land, more opportunities and riches and those sorts of things, it was also looking to spread Christianity, because as Christians, we're supposed to spread the message of Jesus Christ. That's what we're called to do. And so that's what they were trying to do, because always missionaries from the various, usually Catholic orders and Protestants and those groups also actually went with the ships. So they were usually either accompanying or coming in the second wave. And so that's just something to consider as well. Obviously not saying there weren't abuses. Of course there were terrible, terrible conflicts that happened. But some of the emphasis as well was expanding the faith. And so that's why Europe did it first, I think, because China could have also probably done it. They had the technology at about the same time, but they were just more insular in general. They just didn't have that evangelistic mindset. That's a different path. But the Commonwealth history, the shared history, it's there. And yes, it's good, it's bad and good, but it also is right now a benefit to smaller countries, to smaller nations that need to have better trade agreements with the UK. Now, if you're Canada, Australia, New Zealand, it's not as big a deal. You're big countries. But if you're Belize, you're Jamaica, you're the Bahamas, you're South Africa, you're several other countries, that is a huge advantage to have, is to be part of the Commonwealth. And so Meghan, I feel like, really, really zoned in on that, and she wanted that. And Harry, of course, ran right alongside her. And they believe perhaps that they can make this happen because they are still married to the idea of their original Brexit agreement. They still want to be traveling the Commonwealth on the government's dime, taking government money so that they can travel around the world and basically have a free vacation. That was essentially their plan. And the government's like, well, no, if you're not part of the royal family, you can't actually represent us in foreign countries. But again, Harry and Meghan, they are fully in the thrall of their own collective cult. And so they cannot see beyond themselves. And this delusion is just getting so overwhelming and so hard to ignore anymore, because sometimes I feel like I overuse the word delusional, but there's really no other word for it, because sometimes what comes out of his mouth, I'm like, how can nobody call him on the blatant hypocrisy, the basic, sometimes the basic lunacy of what he's saying, and how he's contradicting himself, how he's saying things that he has no right to say. And again, I absolutely love it that he doesn't understand or refuses to acknowledge that what he's saying will hurt his family relations. I'm just like, how dumb are you? Like, that's all I see myself asking all the time is, how dumb are you? Of course it's going to negatively impact your family relationships, but Harry doesn't believe that. And I feel like, again, this is part of the cult. He's in a mindset right now where he, I think, to a certain extent, again, just my opinion, completely controlled by Meghan and her beliefs, because he was a deeply, deeply broken man. I feel like I haven't started his memoir yet, because there's part of me that's like dreading it, because I think the first bit is going to be a slog to get through. And I think as he was so broken and he needed guidance, and I feel like his family tried to help him, but he probably really needed somebody like Meghan, somebody to be his savior in a way. And so he found that in her. Rather than finding it in faith or something like that, he found it in her. And he's gone down this very pseudoscience, mystical pathway that I feel like is totally the antithesis of his Christian faith that he should have. Because I did hear for a while that Harry went to church more than William did. And I thought that was awesome. And I feel like his grandmother would be supremely disappointed in him in the path he's chosen. Because I feel like he's chucked his faith completely out the window, and he's going down whatever gobbledygook Meghan Markle comes up with. So here is some of what he said in this interview. And again, this is transcribed, so I'll tell you the bit and I'll react to it, because I hope you see this. And I'm not, again, trying to say that Harry and Meghan are going to do something super, super nefarious or anything. But I feel like there is this mindset that I feel like is very damaging to Harry and Meghan. And at some point he will probably wake up, because unfortunately, having watched a lot of these documentaries, and I'll list a couple of them below. There was the Heaven's Gate one, the NXIVM one, the Vow, which was really, really good. Especially the second season, it starts off a little slow, but once it gets into some of the background, especially some of the women he was super involved with, it is fascinating what people will do in those situations. It's fascinating. And I don't think it's that level or anything like that. But I want you to get the idea of the pseudoscience and everything behind it, and what these people are searching for, and how this particular person, whoever it might be, happens to have the answer for them. And I feel like that's what Meghan is to Harry. She is the answer for him. She is his guiding light. I believe he does say that in the interview. She is guiding him through life. And so again, that's a super dangerous mentality to have, is to leave that much power in a single person. What I've noticed in a lot of these cult documentaries as well is that people come into it, and yes, there is a high for a while, and I feel like Harry is still in the high right now. But at some point, something for a lot of people, now, it may never happen for Harry. I thought he would wake up after 5 years. I don't know if that's happening. I'm sure there's a lot of tension behind the scenes with them, but I don't know if it's happening yet. And at some point, some people, yes, do break away, but others don't. And others, I feel like they're so broken, they have to have this because this is the only thing they have. And unfortunately, because Meghan has separated Harry from so much of his life, so much of his family, so much of his heritage, his culture, so many things, and I'm not sure now he'll ever get it back. I thought for a while there may be a path back, once they divorce, but I don't know anymore. I really don't. I think the dignified silence the monarchy is using is working. But I think also, and I understand why they've been hesitant to strip the titles, but I think they need to do so. What Harry is saying, he is, I feel like, a danger if he would be on the throne. He is not, I don't feel like, leadership material in any way. And I feel like for the safety and the future of the monarchy, they need to remove him and his children from the line of succession and just be done with it. At this point, that's what they'll have to do. And sometimes you do have to do those things. You do have to make the super hard decisions because there's something bigger you're protecting. And at this point, if something, God forbid, happened to the Waleses, the UK would become a republic like that. I don't think they would last a second. They would just be like, we're done. We don't want Harry and Meghan. Just get rid of them. We're not doing this. Because how can you have somebody who hates your country, who blatantly seems to actually despise your homeland? And I feel like that is a terrible king to potentially have. So let me go get into the interview. So I'm not sure which question he was asked, but he says, when you take a member of the royal family and you put them through therapy, of course, there's going to be a difference. It's like we're speaking different languages. We could not understand each other after that. Before, there was always complications, issues, or whatever. I often had this sense that things didn't feel right. Therapy opened my eyes, cleared away all the gunk and the shit. And all of a sudden, I was like, this has been a really painful process. And now I realize that for the rest of my life, every single day is going to be a work in progress. But I can't leave my family behind. And that's when I started trying to explain to them how some of their decisions and some of the things they were doing or not doing was going to reflect on them badly, especially across the global stage, especially across the Commonwealth with relation to my now wife. And I couldn't get through to them. And it was one or two people that I was trying to get through to. It was a mindset. It was a culture within a bubble that while I was there was unbreakable. It wasn't that I gave up, but I do feel as if I failed in that instance, trying to bring them with me. But as we all know, everyone who has done therapy, the hardest thing in life is to be able to change yourself, let alone change anybody else. Okay, couple of huge things here. I don't know who's Harry's therapist person, but he's not making a good representation of therapy, in my honest opinion. The way he talks about stuff, I know therapy is hugely important. That's not what I'm saying at all. And I know there's a lot of great psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, so many people out there who do fantastic and amazing work. But again, this idea that he's gained some special knowledge and he needs to expand it and give it to other people because now he has knowledge they don't. And he knows how to fix things because he is special now. That's what I feel like is the danger of this path he's going down. And unfortunately, I wonder if Omid Scobie and other people who are in the media, who are their champions, their belief in this and Harry pushing this there was some sort of collaboration to push this very negative narrative on Catherine and William during their tour in the Caribbean, which I feel like was totally unfair to Catherine and William. They're there to do a tour. They were literally shaking people's hands through a fence because there was a fence around the soccer stadium. But what were they supposed to do with the chain link fence? Were they supposed to tear it down and then go like people, if there was another barrier and it was white people, nobody would say a gosh darn thing. So it was just such a manufactured controversy. And the annoying thing too is that I feel like the Jamaican prime minister, president, or whatever, he jumped on this because then he did this whole thing where, we don't want the monarchy anymore. Have they done anything about it? No, of course not. Charles is still their head of state. And if they want to go in the different direction, that's fine. But it's not their job to make Catherine and William, who are doing a job, who are trying to just be general diplomats, make them feel bad and push them to get rid of themselves as head of state. That's your job, Jamaica. That is your job. That is not Catherine's and William's job. And there was a lot of pressure too on Sophie and Edward, who did another Caribbean tour a month after that. So I feel like some people in the media were very aware of this narrative and were pushing it. But I also feel like Harry was looking at this whole thing going, okay, so now I'm officially educated now. Or what is the word I'm looking for? He's gone through whatever initiation rite he feels like he needs to. And now he needs to tell the family how to do things. Well, Harry, that's not your job. That's not your job. You are the spare. As you say so in the title of your book, you are the spare. It's not your job to tell the royal family you're not doing things right. And Harry, I feel like, was going down the very, very woke path. Now, I feel like Catherine and William, they're probably pretty liberal to a certain extent as well, especially probably more a bit on social issues. But you have to understand, too, is that having a knee-jerk reaction to something does not go well. That's why I feel like the Lady Susan Hussey thing, it was a knee-jerk reaction, should have never happened because it gave people an inroads. Instead, you need to take the calm and steady approach. Yes, perhaps we do need to change, but this needs to be a subtle change because at the end of the day, the people are the ones they're trying to please, and they're not trying to please the mob. Because I feel like, especially for example, I watch a lot of videos on what's gone on in Hollywood and how incredibly woke it's gotten. I used to love going to the movies. I haven't gone to the movies in 3+ years, and it has nothing to do with COVID. Absolutely nothing to do with it. I just don't see anything I want to see. I don't see anything I want to pay money to put my butt in the seat and see, because I all know it's so woke and so exaggerated and so disconnected from reality that the stories don't make sense, that the characters are sometimes written horribly, or they have to fit a specifically mold to fit a specific quota. Now, there's nothing wrong with hiring people based on their ability, based on their performance or anything like that. What I have an issue with is you have to hire certain people to fit certain quotas, or you don't get your funding or whatever. Because that, I feel like, creates unrealistic scenarios and it makes stories worse. So I feel like that's what Harry wanted the royal family to go down. And Hollywood is hurting a lot because of this. Because they are so disconnected from reality anymore. Because they are following the woke Twitter mob. All of a sudden, nobody's seeing their movies. Nobody cares to see their movies. Sam Mendes was just complaining that nobody saw his movie. And the reason is that they don't seem to understand is that I want great stories and great, comedies and those sorts of things, but I'm not going to pay to watch somebody preach to me for 2 hours. I'm not going to pay for that. I'm not going to pay for that in a movie, especially the values Hollywood holds, which is what Harry and Meghan now hold. I have no interest in. So I have no desire to go to movies. And so I feel like the monarchy was right to say Harry, who wanted them to go, I feel like, down a similar path, going, no, we're going to change, but it's going to be a slow and steady process. We're going to go with what we feel is right based on the history of the institution, not what the mob is saying. Because I feel like Harry, again, he's over in the Twitter sphere in a lot of ways, in the most woke progressive part of it. That's where his mindset is now. That's where he's been led to, I feel like, to a certain extent by his therapist. But again, that's just my opinion. So the interviewer had some sort of thing where she ended up having to go to rehab and had to get sober. And so she talks about how every member of the family has one specific role to play. The black sheep, the golden child, the clown, that keeps the mobile balance. The moment someone rejects the role and says, hang on, I'm not sure what to do with this anymore, the whole thing tips on its side. And I kind of get what she's saying, but I also think that's not the case. And maybe it's because I'm just a super independent thinker and person, it's not so much the roles that family members place on us, which I feel like does happen, but sometimes it's what we place on ourselves. We become our own self-fulfilling prophecy. If you are funny and you get a reputation within the family for being a bit of a clown, you become the clown. And so those are things that generally happen. And it's not, I don't feel like, necessarily bad. People need all sorts of people within a family to help it make it feel whole. So I feel like putting the emphasis and the burden in one specific area that you have to only fill one mold is what she's talking about here, and how Harry is now breaking it. So he says, it's exactly the same analogy that my therapist here brought up with me. Here must mean California, because he was interviewed in California, so explains so much. I never heard it before, but it's so true. And when it gets out of sync, they, the family, do everything they can to pull you back in. I've been referred to as a cycle breaker. I didn't know what that meant. But yes, if I am someone who is trying to ensure that this generational handing down of trauma stops at me, then I guess that makes me a cycle breaker. A cycle breaker. I almost said psycho breaker. Okay, Harry, everybody has generational trauma. Get over it. Life's tough, can't help it. Everybody has this to a certain extent. And the monarchy, I feel like, happens more than most. And he has very little to complain about, really. If you go back in time, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance period, those sorts of things, what some of these families were doing to each other was really pretty awful. So does Harry have a lot to complain about? No. He really doesn't. But in his own mind, he is a victim, and he is breaking the cycle, and he's going to change everything. The interviewer says, you're a cycle breaker. What I realize is you don't make any friends, especially within your family, which I feel like is a total lie. There's some family members who are fantastic friends. Harry is just in a really weird place right now, because everyone has learned to accept that trauma is a part of life. How dare you as an individual talk about it? Because that makes us all feel really uncomfortable. So, right, you may not like me in the moment, but maybe you'll thank me in 5 or 10 years. Well, that's a pretty arrogant to think, well, I'm going to tell you something. In 5 to 10 years, you'll see that I'm right. I am right. But you could also be dead wrong. You could also be dead wrong. So the monarchy has to do what they feel is right, not what Harry feels is right, not what Meghan feels is right, what they feel is right. And so that's not Harry's call to make. That was the Queen's call, that was Charles's call, and it's William's call. They need to figure out what feels right to them and what feels right in the climate of the UK. Harry's not even there anymore. And I feel like he has been so much in a bubble with Meghan since they got together that he has no clue what the average UK citizen thinks anymore. He doesn't know you guys at all. If you're from the UK, he has no clue what you guys are thinking. Nor does he have any clue what Americans are thinking, because I can tell you, Harry, right now, grown women do not share lip gloss. They don't. They don't. So you saying, well, it's just an American thing. It's a deeply offensive thing to say, Harry. Deeply, deeply offensive, by the way. And so this delusion that he has about this is really crazy when you think about it, that he thinks he's not only going to change his family, but he has this savior. He's a Messiah. He's going to save it from itself. And he is going to save the future spares. But as I know full well within my family, if it's not us, points at chess, it's going to be someone else. And though William and I have talked about it once or twice, and he has made it very clear to me that his children are not my responsibility, I still feel a responsibility. I know that out of all those 3 children, at least one of them will end up like me, the spare, and that hurts and worries me. Oh, give me an ever-loving break, Harry. Give me an ever-loving break. How much time have you spent with those children over the last couple of years? I bet you hardly any time at all. He has hardly spent any time with those children. I have not seen, the only picture I have here, which I use, is Louis' christening picture. Oh, actually, you know what? I originally used Louis' christening picture, and then I changed it to the Trooping the Color in 2019. That is the last time we ever saw Harry with those children, except for at the Queen's funeral. That was the last time. Harry doesn't spend any of that time with those kids. He doesn't know those children. So how exactly is what he's doing going to save them? How exactly is what he's doing going to help them? It's not going to help them at all, because they're not going to have the problems he did. They're not going to have the problems he did. He is projecting his issues onto his niece and nephew. Charlotte and Louis, I feel like the Waleses, and I deeply hope this is true, this is just my supposition, is that what they are doing is that they are raising their kids, I hope, with the understanding that they are all equal intrinsically as human beings. As human beings, we are all intrinsically equal, no matter our size, shape, disability, any sorts of things. We are all equal. But our levels of ability and our places in life differ. Some people are doctors, some people are janitors. That's just life. That's just life. There's just varying levels of ability, and your success in life, I feel like, is not only trying to perhaps get yourself ahead, but some people, they're fine doing the jobs that they have, even if, some people may say, oh, I would never do that job. Some people are fine with it. I feel like Charlotte and Louis will understand that, yes, George is king, will be king, and it is somewhat their job to support him. But I also feel like they will have their own passions, their own lives, and they are being raised in a stable, loving household, not the chaos Harry was. And I feel like perhaps you could say too, if he was abusing marijuana when he was younger, that can't actually affect your brain chemistry long term. I feel like they will be much more stable, and they'll be able to manage this 1,000 times better than Harry. 1,000 times better than Harry. And we've seen this, I feel like, too, when you look at the Wales' kids. I feel like for any royal, what you need to have is at least 3 children. If you are the heir, you need to have 3 kids. That way you can have 1 who's the heir and 2 spares. And that is so the spares can support each other and support the future king. And they don't have this burden of being the heir and the spare. And I feel like the dynamic is especially bad if there's 2 boys. I feel like the 2 boys, I feel like the competition's even worse. And we did see a bit of this with Elizabeth and Margaret. And again, I feel like this is a struggle. And I wonder how Leonor and Sophia of Spain will do, because Leonor is the future queen and Sophia, Infanta Sophia, will not be. And so I feel like having 2 children of the same gender, I feel like that competition does increase naturally, because you do have more kids to compete with. We also have, for example, in Denmark, there are 4 children from the Crown Prince. So I feel like, again, the spares can support each other. And then in the Netherlands, there are 3 daughters of the king. So Katharina Amalia will be queen, and she has 2 sisters who will both be spares. And so they, again, will find their own path in life. Norway, we have 2, so the daughters first and then the sons second. I feel like somewhat, if you have mixed genders, it's better for the kids in the long run, if they're a boy and a girl rather than 2 girls or 2 boys. I feel like based on, especially sometimes the 2 gender roles, I feel like sometimes it's better if the guy is going to be king and the girl is going to be a spare. I feel like sometimes that works better. Just, I know some people will be like, oh, screaming to the wind, but I feel like to a certain extent, That might be better. So we have Estelle and so Crown Princess Victoria, she will be queen. She has 2 children, so she has Estelle who will be the future queen, and then Oscar. All this is just basic speculation. But I feel like generally, again, having more children is better for the spare situation, and having them be in different genders. So obviously you have George and then Charlotte. I feel like that's a good dynamic. And I feel like George and Charlotte are really, really close. And I feel like they will fight. They won't get along all the time, but I feel like when they're adults, I feel like they'll be really, really close. And Louis will be a part of that. He may be just a little separated because he's a bit younger. And I feel like Charlotte and George really had time to bond before he was born. And so he may just be a bit more of the class clown, basically. But I feel like, again, he will grow up and be a productive member of the royal family. They won't have the issues Harry did. They won't have the issues in the slightest. So his idea that he's going to come and help them, I'm sure Catherine and William was so right when he said, they're not your responsibility. Please stop talking about my children. You have no right to talk about them. You have no right to talk about their roles, their impact, anything like that. Catherine and I are handling it. You're not even a part of their lives. Shut up, Harry. I feel like that was probably William's response. And it continues, I'm someone who likes to fix things. If I see wrongdoing in a pattern of behavior that is harming people, I will do everything I can and change it. And I may not be agreed upon at that time, but I'm coming at such long-term strategic thinking. This is not about trying to collapse the monarchy. This is about trying to save them from themselves. And I know I will get crucified by numerous people for saying that. Yeah, because you have a Messiah complex. You ain't saving Jack. You're not even there. You're not even there. You are a joke. People think you are a joke. And your even brother said, please don't talk to about my children like this. Please go away. And honestly as well, Harry's belief that I have long-term strategic thinking. Yeah, you and Meghan suck at this. You really, really suck at this. And perhaps somebody else is helping you. I feel like perhaps Meghan is helping you navigate. Well, if we do this and this, maybe one day not only will we be king and queen, we'll be back in the Commonwealth. We will be royals again and those sorts of things. So I feel like they're almost trying to get back to there. They were not expecting their proposal to be completely shot down. They were not expecting it in the slightest. So I feel like they're still pretty miffed about that. But long-term strategic thinking was not their forte. Neither one of them. They have handled everything so stinking badly from just a PR perspective, a basic human emotional perspective, that they just don't come across as bright as people. So this idea that they have this long-term plan, yes, it's not going to go well because honestly right now you're overexposed. You're overexposed and you put way too much that people didn't need to know. We didn't need to know. You didn't need to talk about your penis 3 times or that you were circumcised. Honestly, we don't care. We don't want to know. And especially talking about it in relation to that you opened up this Elizabeth Arden cream to help you, with your todger. And all of a sudden, the scent took you back to your mother. Okay, you're about to rub this on your private area and you're talking about your mother. Do you not understand how Freudian that is, Harry? I'm sure he doesn't. I'm amazed the things that got through this dumb book. Really, you really thought as an editor that was the thing that we needed to hear? Really? Almost I feel like so many of the times people are playing a joke on Harry and Meghan that they're getting them in and then they're letting them make a fool of themselves just because for kicks and grins and giggles and money. I just feel like that's what's going on. Okay, next thing. One of the themes across the interviews is, how can you say you want your brother and father back? Surely writing a book is not the way of going about it. And my answer to that is, I've tried everything else. I've tried everything I can. It's as if they don't want reconciliation because keeping us as the villains and keeping the press focused on us help detract from everything else that's going on within that family. Okay, Harry, you guys are a convenient punching bag and you've made yourself so. You gotta live with that. You guys constantly court the press, so don't tell me you don't. That's ridiculous. And B, what is the royal family trying to hide? Because I'm certain, absolutely certain the press has a mountain of stuff on you they could leak and a mountain of stuff on Meghan Markle. There's a great quote in here at some point that made me literally laugh out loud because it was like so ridiculous. And I'm like, you really think that, don't you? Don't you, Harry? Aw. Bless his heart. I feel like everything should stipulate with, oh, bless his heart. This is it's considered a somewhat Southern saying, although I heard it in Wyoming for the first time actually, is that you can say anything bad about somebody as long as you say, bless your heart. And so that's just something we should say about Harry. And the monarchy isn't keeping Harry and Meghan as much the villains as Harry and Meghan are giving them the ammunition to make everybody think they're the villains. And again, it's one of those things where Harry, cause and effect is a mystery to him, absolute mystery. So you tell us you love your grandmother, you don't see her the day before her death, and we're the villains for noticing that. It's, again, this thing where I don't feel like Harry's therapy, and I should have, I guess, led with this with the therapy too. I don't feel like Harry's therapy has been good for him because he doesn't take any responsibility for anything. Everything else is everybody else's fault. Everything. Him wearing the German uniform of a certain origin for 1939. His decision to, smoke weed and that he got caught for it. That was everybody else's fault. And I feel like every single thing is everybody else's fault. So how can you tell me you really want therapy, you really want to get better when you're blaming everybody else for your own stupid mistakes? That's not healthy. That doesn't tell me you've actually been through therapy. And that's why whatever therapist he's using, sorry, just my opinion, you can absolutely use them if you want to. I will not be looking at their services. That's just my opinion. That's one part of it, but also my technique here at this point, because I do genuinely want my father and my brother back in my life, as opposed to what it is now, which is, it couldn't be worse, is that the more I can bring the relationship between the press and the palace to light, the higher the chance is of that ceasing completely. And therefore protecting other members of the family, because again, it's not about us. It's someone else. And I know I'm not going to make friends in that process, but I also don't understand how so much of what happened from one version, one side of this story, how me telling the other side, the truthful side, is so shocking and so outrageous. Okay, Harry, we've already found some really critical errors in your book of your own flippant memory. Here's the thing. You're not telling the truth. You're telling your version of the truth. The royal family has their version of the truth. And then there's the actual truth in the middle. Any freaking cop can tell you that. Any freaking cop can tell you that. The idea that Harry holds the truth is utterly lunacy. He does not have the truth. He has a truth, his truth. What he believes is the truth. That's not the truth. The truth is not something that is swayed by one side or the other. Harry, every truth to him is a point for him and Meghan. Whereas the rest of the royal family, it's a point against them. And again, there's this whole thing where Harry wants to break the relationship between the palace and the press. Well, buddy, they have to have a relationship. They have to have a relationship. You can't kick them out. They have to have this dynamic. Again, this is ludicrous that Harry is thinking this and pushing this. And again, he wants to, not only does he want to get rid of the press, he wants to replace it with something that's beneficial to himself and Meghan. That's what he wants to do. He wants to have basically a dictatorship over the press. But a free world cannot exist without being able to critique someone. And the monarchy does need to be criticized, but so do Harry and Meghan. But they don't want that. They don't want criticism, because to criticize them is dangerous to them. And again, does that not ring as Scientology, guys? It does ring of it. It does, definitely does. Okay, so next bit, which in turn creates a lot of hateful rhetoric. Hateful, Harry says, as well as feeding endless books, right? He also said there's been 3 figures of books written about him, which I highly, highly doubt. Now, there's been well over 100 books written about the royal family, but as you'll notice from my shelf, there's been a lot written. I would say 100 books about Henry VIII. Oh, heck to the yeah. Harry, Prince Harry, no. There's been so for Meghan, we had this one by Andrew Norton, which I got at the grocery store for like $8 or something. And obviously there's Finding Freedom, and there's one that her sister was writing, and 1 or 2 others maybe. But Harry, I would say at the most 20, 25. And this idea again that he holds the full truth, well, there's, again, variations of it, buddy. And then there's actually the real thing, which you don't have. Because the thing, again, I think you've drank the Kool-Aid a bit too much. Endless books, again, anonymously, and never being held accountable for the words and actions that you are feeding into. Or at some point in your life, at the age of 38, going, you know what, enough. And being brave enough to stand behind those words and correct the narrative for your own mental health and for the sake of your wife and yourself and your family, hoping for the love of God that this puts a stop to it. When we left, we genuinely thought we would be left alone, and that was so naive. And I wanted to point that out because I wanted to bring up this picture here of Harry and Meghan. This was one of the first pictures we got of them in the United States, and I feel like it's very important to say that although Harry and Meghan, yes, they'll be quiet for periods of time, they always leak things. They're always talking to people. They're always courting attention. And so we give them attention because they're asking for it. Then Harry complains about it and says, well, we didn't want anything. Well, it's like, well, live a normal life. Live a private life. You don't want that. And in the industry you're in, you will always have to sell your soul to make a buck. That's the truth. That is the absolute 100% truth, is that Harry and Meghan will constantly have to sell themselves. And that's a reality that Harry, I think, refuses to acknowledge and is so deluded at this point, he has no clue it actually exists. You really thought you'd be able to go to Canada and just get on with your life? Well, the first idea, the first plan, as we made very clear through that Instagram statement, almost exactly 3 years ago to the day, the proposal was, we'd like to separate our time between Canada and the UK, which I call complete BS. Meghan Markle always wanted to go to California. She always wanted to make her Hollywood dreams come true, and Harry is the dim guy that she managed to catch to do that. We still want to work within the institution. We just want to carve out a different role where we are financially independent, to remove the supposed public interest argument for the press, which is that if you are taxpayer funded, then your whole life is owned by us. But here's the problem, Harry. If you are representing the UK government and you are also making money on the back of whatever you're doing, then everything you do comes into question as well. So, for example, Harry and Meghan were not invited to the diplomatic reception before the funeral of Her Majesty the Queen. The reason why is the royal family could not trust them to try to gain business interests and try to hobnob with people, to network, to make money for themselves. And that's what they'd be doing every single Commonwealth trip, is making money for themselves. It's figuring out how to make those trips pay them. And that's why the monarchy could not do it. They couldn't do it. The taxpayer-funded aspect, of course, would also be come into question because the taxpayer would be paying for the plane, they'd be paying for the security, they'd be paying for their clothing, their wardrobe, their transportation everywhere, cars, all their staff members. So this lunatic idea that they could basically travel the world on the government's dime, be financially independent, and yet still at the same time also take money from his father because they said they didn't want the sovereign grant. Not that they weren't going to still take money from Charles. And then they could basically do whatever the heck they wanted. You can't do that. You cannot do that. If you are being funded by the taxpayers, especially royals. Royals are different than politicians. Politicians do curry favors, make money on the side, yada, 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 which they shouldn't do either. Let's be honest, they shouldn't do it. But royals are different in that royals will always be funded by the taxpayer. From William's birth to his death, he will be funded by the taxpayer. So if he is making money off, let's say, going to Australia and then perhaps investing in a vineyard and getting money and revenue from that, from connections he made by traveling to Australia, that will be called into question. Again, this is a very critical thing that Harry is totally missing and does not think his audience is sharp enough to catch up on. And that, again, is dangerous because he is making an argument to your average everyday person might seem somewhat reasonable. But if you understand the stipulations the monarchy is under, and is that they cannot come into repute because they are there at the will of the people. If they are making money off the back of these trips, that pulls the whole institution into disrepute. They can't do it. Now, granted, Charles makes money off some of the items from Highgrove. My understanding is that it goes directly back into Highgrove. It goes to other places. So yes, he does make some money off of it. For example, William can sell some property in Cornwall and get some of the money from that, but that's at a limit. So I feel like under 500,000, maybe it's just 50,000. I think it might be just 50,000. William can sell property, sell items, but once it goes above that mark, he needs government permission to do it because he can't just take the Duchy of Cornwall, which is $1 billion business, and just sell it outright and pocket the change, because that is there to support the heir, the future heir to the throne, their children, their, perhaps their siblings and stuff. And the king and queen get the Duchy of Lancaster, which is worth a bit less than the Duchy of Cornwall. Again, all this is very complicated, but again, Harry knows that the American audience, for the most part, which is who he's trying to sell, doesn't know these intricacies of royalty, of how things work. Naturally, because of the media's role in this, our exit was misrepresented. Our proposal was misrepresented within the institution, and that was incredibly damaging and sad. Now, I will say again, Harry and Meghan are terrible communicators, and we read into it what we were supposed to read into it, Harry. You just didn't want us to read that. And again, if we are constantly misinterpreting what you're saying, then you guys have a poor messaging strategy. That's on you. That is on you. If people don't understand what you're saying, then it's your job to change up how you're saying it. It's your job to change up how you're selling it. So for example, I worked in customer service for a while, just in general retail. And for certain customers, I would change up how I said particular things. Even though I had the same thing, I would change up how I said it because they weren't interpreting it right. And I feel like if the broad world is not interpreting what you want correctly, that's on you. That's poor messaging. That's a poor strategy. Whatever you guys are doing ain't working. And you're putting the burden on the people for misrepresenting that, rather than looking introspectively and seeing, okay, maybe we said the wrong thing. Maybe we should have used this thing. Maybe we should have just waited until everybody agreed what the terms of Mexit would be before we jumped the gun and announced it, because we thought we had the power in this situation. Oopsie doopsie, the crown is actually the one with the power. They, the royal family, scuppered that whole plan, mainly, sadly, through their need to financially control us. The jealousy in this unfortunate situation, whereby us just existing outside their control, is somehow problematic for them. Again, like I said, it was this question of how Harry and Meghan were going to use the opportunities they were given to represent the state to financially enrich themselves. And again, deeply, deeply problematic. They could not do it. And Harry's obsession with this idea that they're just jealous of us. They're just jealous of us. Well, I'm sorry, but Charles will be king and get to hold the 2 largest diamonds in the whole world. Just FYI, the 2 largest cut diamonds. William will be king, Catherine will be queen, Camilla is queen. They get access to so many things that Harry, you don't get access to. So they weren't trying to financially control Harry because they didn't want him to, for example, go and perhaps do this. I think they were somewhat supportive of the idea. But the concern is how they would twist and use their connection to the royal family to enrich themselves, that could potentially put the royal family in a really bad spot, a really bad light, and call them into disrepute, which is exactly what we've seen happen. Harry is proving that the monarchy was 100% right in cutting them off. 100% right in cutting them off. And the monarchy needs to do, I think, more now. You need to do a step more. Harry is not somebody you can trust in the slightest. Meghan definitely isn't somebody you can trust. They need to, in my opinion, go ahead and strip the titles and strip them in the line of succession. I know Harry at some point may come back, but if he's fully invested in this, you need to think of the future of your country, not trying to appease your wayward son. And that's the saddest part about it, that there was an opportunity for us to continue to work for them and with them, and we just could not stand by having to be stuck in the UK, whereby every single element of our worth went through the filter of the British tabloids, and where we knew that the very people who were supposed to protect us were complicit in all their stories that were literally destroying my wife in front of my very eyes, to the point that I was coming back from London to Frogmore after Archie was born, and I would walk into the nursery, and there she was in the flood of tears dripping on Archie while she was breastfeeding him, and that was the breaking point for me. Okay, a couple things here. Number one, I'm sorry, Harry, but you and Meghan, the monarchy can do without you. You're the spare. Your wife is also the spare wife, so ergo, the monarchy has other people, you know, they have George and Charlotte and Louis. They really didn't need you anymore. So this idea that Harry and Meghan were crucial to them and they wanted to work with them. But Harry and Meghan wanted to set the terms. The monarchy is like, we need to set the terms. We're the monarchy. You are the bit players. And Harry and Meghan, again, they wanted that level of control they could not have because of their positions. They could not have that. And again, we've been told time and time again, Harry and Meghan don't read the things about them in the news, but Meghan's crying about it. So obviously she read it, or somebody read it to her. And why is she always crying? She's always bawling. I would love to know if she's actually had tears running down her face or not, because again, I feel like every time Harry walks in, she's crying. She's crying. And honestly, it makes me question Meghan a lot. And honestly, yeah, it's just, I don't totally buy that. And again, if they're not looking at it, why is she freaking out about it? Who is watching it for? Why are they obsessing about it? And again, what Harry and Meghan fail to acknowledge is that they also leak things about themselves to put themselves in a good light. Meghan's friends leaked to People magazine. Of course, she had nothing to do with it. She had nothing to do with it, yet somehow they knew about her father's letter and what was in it. I think one of the things that may really wake Harry up at some point, if it does happen, is realizing Meghan Markle leaked something that he blames on the palace. or Camilla or Catherine or William. I feel like that may be something where he really starts to question things, is realizing she leaked something when he blamed it on somebody else. And there's irrefutable proof that it was her. It was her, somebody connected to her, something like that. Harry may kind of jostle out of himself with that. And there's someone, Meghan, who doesn't read the stories. Again, called complete and utter BS for me. She would be dead if she was reading the stories. She was still getting texts from friends saying, I hope you're okay. I've seen the news. And that was enough, because she just knew that if her friends, who very rarely reached out in that context, if they were reaching out, then she knew it was bad. So what are you supposed to do? As a boyfriend, I raised the alarm. As a husband, I raised the alarm. As a dad, I've raised the alarm. And the people had listened. This never would have happened. That's the saddest part about this, is that it was all so avoidable. But they just couldn't help themselves. Well, yeah, neither could you. You wanted to make $100 million. Give me a freaking break. She wanted to make money. She wanted to go to California. She wanted to have the Duchess of Sussex plastered on everything. She wanted her flippin' Oscar. Give me an ever-loving break. Don't believe it in the slightest. It also says, so when asked, how can people connect with you? I love Harry's response. No. Okay, so it's actually the author. She has this whole long thing that she says that, what would 2 millionaires living in Montecito have to do with me during a cost of living crisis? And I always say, well, everything really, because there has been this total normalization of hatred when it comes to them. In the book, you talk about royals being like insects and what fun we, the media, have in pulling your wings off. But that's something we see not just with the royals or in the media, but everywhere in life now. Kids are being bullied on social media. Whenever I write something in defense of you, I get abused. I got an email recently calling me a fat Jewish bitch. It's mad. It's just mad. And I hate that the word woke has been turned into an insult. And Harry goes, only the British press could turn a word that really everyone should want to be into a criticism. I don't want to be woke, Harry. Don't want to be woke in the slightest. No appeal to me whatsoever. Because again, I believe in diversity in terms of I believe everybody should be looked at and judged that they are human of equal value, but everybody has different skill sets. Everybody has different abilities. And so I just don't like the idea that we're giving jobs to people based solely on the color of their skin. I'm not for that. Not for that in the slightest. I'm not for that in the slightest. And that goes every other way. In a movie or something, cast a person that's the best for the role. Don't cast them just because they fit a specific quota for you. That generally leads to bad movies. Just saying. So she explains that it's a word, it was created by African Americans in the 50s and 60s to describe being alert to racism and social injustice, and been co-opted mostly by white men as an insult. You almost couldn't make it up. It's fear, Harry says. So much of it is fear of them losing control. It's not personal. What my wife represents is what these people are attacking. It's symbolic annihilation in a nutshell. Okay, Harry, you have no clue anything about genocide. That terminology you're using is completely inappropriate in this situation. You need to walk that back. In a nutshell, because none of these people have met her, she hasn't done anything wrong. She's literally turned up and done the best job she can, which is probably where she went wrong. She hasn't done anything wrong. She hasn't done anything wrong. Everybody's done something wrong. Of course she's done something wrong, Harry. Of course she has. She's human. To err is human. So she did something wrong. I don't care what you think it is. I know she did something wrong because everybody does something wrong. And she was brand new to this. You can't tell me she did the perfect job if she failed at it and you guys left. Obviously she was crap at her job. Just saying. That logic doesn't make any sense. You can't make that dog hunt, as they say. I know that the press have got a S-H-I-T. Okay, why did she put an asterisk between B-I-T-C-H and then, yeah, here we'll write a S-H-I-T. I don't understand that. A ton of dirt about my family. I know they have, and also on you, bud, and also on you. And they sweep it under the carpet for juicy stories about someone else. I know that M was being used as a catalyst for a culture war. But she instigated it too, because when you came out with that letter, it wasn't just please leave my girlfriend alone. It was you guys are all doing something racist. So the culture war was really started by you, Harry. Not us. If you had let it go, then perhaps it would have been swept under the rug. But no, you made it a culture war by saying and calling everybody racist. That was on you. So many people don't want to see it or can't see it because everywhere you look, you're getting the same message. And that's probably the most dangerous thing. Even if you say you don't read the tabloids, it's still leaving an imprint in your mind. Well, so it is on you too, but it's also doing that to you because you obviously read it and obviously it terrifies you and you get very obsessed with it. He also goes on to say, I was completely open book to him. So this is about his ghostwriter. I told him to ask me whatever he wanted, and that would tell him everything. And yes, the first draft was different. It was 800 pages. I'm sorry, Harry, your life is not that interesting. It doesn't need to be 800 pages, but here's the reason. And now it's down to about 400 pages. It could have been 2 books, put it that way. And it was a bit hard taking things out. My trip to Nepal in 2016 after the earthquake, that was a real moment for me because it was a real reflexive trip that led me into my relationship with Meghan. So he's threatening basically a second book. That's what he's doing right there. He's threatening a second book, and he will do it because he has nothing else. Again, I don't feel like Harry and Meghan, either one of them are that talented, and they have nothing else but the monarchy. So they are going to go after the monarchy the hardest they can because that's all they have to sell is their connection to it. As far as we're aware, Harry and Meghan haven't done much else. They've given a little bits of money here and there for Archwell. They went to Uvalde, Texas for no flipping reason to get them cheap snacks. They gave a basket of bagels to 10 people in Washington, D.C. and wanted praise for it. And so, again, all these different things, it's like, okay, what do you guys want here? Because you obviously are courting attention constantly, yet you think we're all too obsessed with you, yet you won't go away. So, but you're also talking, one of the things I know people don't like always talking about Harry and Meghan, but I feel like it's important too, is that the media is not calling them to snuff in a lot of ways. So I feel like it's important to push back against their narrative because especially in the United States, not a ton of people do it. I've seen a couple of people, mostly in the conservative space, do it. But, some in the liberal space, they're just going full bore and say, well, Harry, it's great. Harry's sharing exactly what he feels. It's like, yeah, but it's not the truth. That's not everything that should be said. But that had to come out. There wasn't space for it. So I was really sad with some of the bits that were taken out. And there were other bits that I shared with JR, which I had to say, look, I'm telling you this just for context, but there's absolutely no way I'm putting it in there. So JR has a ton of dirt on the royal family now, just saying. So she asked, why would you not put those bits in? Because, here he pauses. Because on the scale of things I would include for family members, there are certain things that, look, anything I'm going to include about any of my family members, I'm going to get trashed for. I knew that walking into it. But it's impossible to tell my story without them in it because they play such a crucial part in it. And also because you need to understand the characters and personalities of everybody within the book. So this is basically saying that Charles, William, Catherine, Camilla are all a caricature. And I feel this too I haven't started reading it yet, but when he just uses Willie instead of William, or Prince William. He uses Kate instead of Catherine. And when he uses Pa instead of Charles. And when he uses the other woman for Camilla. He is devaluing them in their position in a way. He's pulling them down. I realize and understand that's how he refers to them, but I don't like it when people refer to family members that they refer to them that privately, publicly as well. And I feel like, again, that takes William and Charles, who should have an elevated position as the king and future king, and pulls them down to a lower level, Harry's level, because he needs, again, to make them equals. When I saw that, again, I feel like Harry devalued them very, very publicly in that book. There are some things that have happened, especially between me and my brother, and to some extent between me and my father, that I just don't want the world to know, because I don't think they would ever forgive me. Well, I don't think they'd forgive you now, you nincompoop, but again, logic, cause and effect, complete and utter mystery to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And so he goes on to say, now you could argue that some of the stuff I put in here, they will never forgive me anyways. But the way I see it is that I'm willing to forgive you for everything you've done, and I wish you'd actually sit down with me properly. Instead of saying I'm delusional and paranoid, actually sit down and have a proper conversation about this, because what I'd really like is some accountability. Okay, there's something really critical there that Harry should not have done if he was any sort of professional person who was giving statements. He said this in his interview with Tom Bradby as well. My family tells me I'm delusional and paranoid. My family's telling me I'm delusional and paranoid. He said that twice now. Twice. What that tells us, to a certain extent, is that Either Harry believes it or he is repeating his own family's narrative that he's delusional and paranoid, hopefully that we see that he's not. Yet all he is doing is confirming to me that he is. And it's something where if you're being interviewed, for example, and they're asking you, why don't you like Meghan Markle? I shouldn't start with, well, I don't like Meghan Markle because of X. I should say something else. For example, like, well, I feel like Meghan in certain situations, I feel like she doesn't follow protocol. She's a bad representation of the UK, the United States, those sorts of things. Because I'm not really confirming my bias, which I feel like Harry is doing. He's confirming his own bias that his family has given to him. And I feel like he has a complex about this and he's trying to push back against it, but all he's doing to me is confirming it. And again, I said this in a previous video, you cannot reason with crazy. And that's what I feel like the monarchy has realized, is that they can't reason with Harry right now. And they can't tell him a list of grievances that they have because Harry has a list of his own and they don't agree with what the grievances are. So you can't really reconcile if on the basis you don't even understand, you can't even come to an agreement about what those schisms have been. And here's the kicker. And an apology to my wife. Yes, Harry wants the royal family to grovel to Meghan Markle. He wants them to grovel on their hands and knees because he worships Meghan Markle and they made the catastrophic error of not thinking she was the greatest thing since sliced bread and worshipping the very ground she walked on. That was Harry, to me, that was the ultimate sin of his family, was not being insanely in love with Meghan Markle like he is. And again, that's super dangerous and the monarchy was right not to do it. They don't need to be fawning over Meghan Markle. Why do you need to fawn over Meghan Markle? It doesn't make any sense. So I feel like they were completely right in keeping their distance from her. I feel like they were completely smart in recognizing that what Harry and Meghan were saying obviously was contradictory, not true, etc., etc. So I feel like, again, they were recognizing this and saying, no, we're not going to go down this path. But Harry, again, he wants this groveling apology to his wife because he worships her and he thinks everybody else should too. And he says, because you know what you did and now I know why you did it. So he's supposing that all the royals spilled hundreds of awful and shared hundreds of awful stories about Meghan Markle and it's all their fault. It's all their fault. Not that she was a terrible person to work with or anything. Not that she didn't follow protocol in the slightest. Not that she obviously didn't care about protocol or anything. And no, of course, she did nothing wrong because she's perfect. And you've been caught out. So just come clean and then we can all move on. Again, the burden is Harry's putting all the burden on the royal family when actually really the burden is all on him. He's the one who's left. He's the one who's made a mess of things. It's his mess to clean up. And if you have been through therapy and even through part of AA, part of it is making amends. Harry needs to be the first step. Harry needs to take the first step. And he's not doing that. And the monarchy should say, the ball is not in their court, it's in Harry's court. When Harry is ready, when Harry recognizes the wrongs he did, then he can come back. But the royal family at this point cannot give in to Harry because in his deluded mind, he is right. He needs to recognize first and foremost that he has been wrong on things. He has been wrong. That's the first thing he needs to recognize. But the choice of what I kept in there was specific to trying to paint a picture of who the individual is and what part they play and why they've reacted the way that they have, with compassion to their situation because of their role within the hierarchy of the monarchy in their relationship or their office's relationship with the press. And again, Harry has no sympathy for his family, so again, I call it complete BS on that. And that was all part of it. And the relationship between me and William was for many years a relationship between us. But then because some people that he employed into the office, all of a sudden there was a third party to that. And you can't have a functioning relationship built on trust when anything you say or anything you pass on to your team ends up being spun for the benefit of that principal against the other principal, which in this case is two brothers. Again, he's just mad that they did not, again, treat him as they did William. But they all knew too. Here's the thing about hierarchies and monarchies. You know who the power resides in. It's not Harry, it's William. That's the reality of it. William was also married for 10 years basically, or at least 8 years before Harry and Meghan got married. So William had a lot of power in this situation and his staff members are not idiots. So they knew who to rely on. But I also think that if Meghan was bullying staff members, and one of their shared employees took that up to Simon Case, who was William's private secretary, who took it up to somebody else. Harry is blaming them all for that, even though it was the staff members themselves who coalesced against Harry and Meghan because Harry and Meghan were horrible bosses. And if you are a horrible boss, you should not be surprised that your employees don't want to protect you, that your employees have no interest and no investment in telling good stories about you. Again, the mysteries of life to Harry and Meghan I find incredibly stunning. The family is like a casting. It's like a combination between a soap opera and a pantomime. And everyone that comes into it, everyone in it has a role. Normally the role is defined by the British press, and I played into that role that I was given. Falling out of clubs drunk, attacking paparazzi. I hold myself fully responsible for that. Well, apparently that's the only thing he does. And again, yes, people have parts to play in life, Harry. That's life. That is how life works. And so the interviewer asked Meghan was cast in the role as a difficult woman, as if the monarchy had never encountered a difficult person before. But that's the thing. That's the unconscious bias. Well, Harry, if she was a bitch, she was a bitch. And she was a bully. Allegedly. That's what the staff members are inferring. And so obviously they didn't like you and they didn't say nice things about you again. Just saying. But that's the thing. That's the unconscious bias. But you look back on the history of how many members of my family has shouted at staff that apparently is all forgotten about, and Meghan's a bully. Well, apparently, Harry, you just confirmed again, because you're a dunderhead, that your wife shouted at staff members. Bravo. It's like, what? No. The members of the family that are literally caught up within this construct have some issues to deal with. But an outsider, not an outsider, someone from a normal life coming in, does not behave like the people are within. You only have to watch Succession to realize this. Again, so I feel like Harry and Meghan live in Instagram and movies, so the Succession reference, Harry, Succession is fiction. It is a fictional television show, just like Game of Thrones. So even though the machinations of some things that they are doing mimic real life, it's not real life, Harry. It's not real life. We should all know this. So the picture that the press tried to paint is Harry's a little bit naughty, a little bit cheeky, but he cares about his work and he leads by his heart. Fair enough? I mean, that's not a bad thing for people to think about you, Harry. I don't know why you have such an issue with that. Fair enough. And then there's Meghan. She's got her own career, never been in the tabloids before. No skeletons in the closet. I laughed uproariously at that. Yeah, Harry, go ahead and keep believing that. Go ahead and keep believing that. I'm sure there's skeletons in her closet. Because, yeah, she's a person, and honestly, her history is kind of sketchy. Not in, like, a horrible way, but I feel like there's a lot of questions, especially about her early childhood and who she was living with. Was she really with her mom, or was she mostly with her dad? Because I think she was mostly with her dad, and she told you she was mostly with her mom. So, recollections vary, Harry. Never had anything bad written about her. Of course, because nobody cared. Harry, nobody cared. And all of a sudden, when we met, we're these narcissistic, crazy, deranged, damaged people. Yeah, I can see it. So the author says, I think we need to stop bandying around the word narcissist so much. And Harry's like, yeah. But when I've seen it used, especially with us, it's used by people with narcissistic tendencies. Well, everybody has narcissistic tendencies, Harry. You're not the only one. Which again is projection. And it all leads back to a few powerful, let's not say powerful, influential, white, older British men. So again, it comes back to sexism, the misogynoir. If my role is to stand up for my wife and other women, Harry, I don't want you standing up for me. Please sit down. I don't want you standing up for me. You don't represent me. You don't represent me at all. You don't represent my gender well in the slightest, because your wife, as I heard recently from somebody, is a harpy. So yeah, I'm not, please don't say things like that about me. And to encourage other men to do the same. Yeah, please don't encourage other men to do that. Harry, sit down. You gotta sit down. Without them thinking that maybe that's vulnerable or whatever, then I will continue to the good fight and to stand up for what I believe in. Even more so now, I have kids. Because if you don't lead by example, what is the point of living? What example? You abandoned your family, you abandoned your country, you abandoned your job to go and make money. Those are not things I put value in. I put value on family, not destroying my family. So how does he represent my value? He doesn't represent any values. There's so much toxic masculinity around the world right now. And I know that sometimes it's easier to fall for the hatred, the negativity and the spin. It's easier and quicker. But I get so much more satisfaction from living by my principles and my values. I have no clue what your principles or values are, Harry, but to me, there are nothing I subscribe to in the slightest. Now, yes, you could say this channel is negative, but what I want to do is highlight the inconsistencies in what he's saying and why what he's saying doesn't make sense. And how, for example, him saying that he represents me as a woman, that he wants to help elevate me as a woman. It's like, sit down. No, I don't want you, because what you are representing is something I have no vested interest in supporting. I think it's really interesting time globally when people in positions like myself need to stand up for this. The more criticism that I get from a certain group of people, then the more I'm going to speak out. If I see bigotry, if I see racism, if I see sexism, then as a member of the British royal family, I feel obliged and tremendous responsibility to call it out, says the guy who was caught naked in Vegas. And Harry, you are not the savior of humanity. And again, this goes back to the complex of the cult. They're there to save us. They're there to help us. They've been enlightened and they need to enlighten us as well. Because part of cult is bringing more people in, evangelizing to a certain extent. Not in the way I like to see evangelism done, but it's to bring them in, and they go after specific people. So here he wants the woke mom. I don't think he probably fully understands that, but that's what he wants. And as a member of the British royal family, Harry needs to stop saying those things, or the royal family needs to force him to stop saying those things, because he's pulling them again into disrepute by saying stuff like that. So again, now I'm wondering, is it the cult of Meghan or the cult of therapy? So Harry says, but I was walking around thinking about my mother the whole time. I was doing everything humanly possible not to think about her. And therapy was the greatest thing to ever happen to me, other than my now wife. The process was revelatory because we got to the point where I started to deal with my trauma. And I started to confront the idea that mommy wanted me to cry. I convinced myself that she must have wanted me to cry. That's the only way I can prove to her that I still miss her. But then after taking the psychedelic with the proper people, I suddenly realized, wow, it's not about crying. She just wants me to be happy. So he saw a fake Diana and whatever in his vision, and she said she just wanted him to be happy. Well, I think that would be obvious anyways. Again, who are these therapists people? Like, seriously. And again, he's not taking any accountability for everything. So again, the making amends that comes normally with AA is recognizing what you have done is wrong and requesting forgiveness from people. Harry is not there yet. So ergo, therapy did not work for him. So this weight off my chest was not the need to cry. It was the acceptance and the realization that she has gone, but that she wants me to be happy, and she's still very much present in my life. As two brothers, if one of you goes through that experience and the other one doesn't, it naturally creates a further divide between you, which is really sad. But as much as William was the first person to even suggest therapy, I just wish he would have been able to find the same benefits as opposed to believing why he doesn't need to. Okay, Harry, bless your heart. I think William thought you were devolving into pseudo-psychology, and he was like, oh, heck to the no. Oh, heck to the no. He has no interest in that because he's done actual therapy, meaning that he has looked at things. He didn't need to take a drug to let him know his mother wanted him to be happy. No, he said, okay. He went to therapy and confronted his issues rather than surrounding them in this psychobabble. And again, you have to remember, Meghan's the one who suggested Harry go to therapy. I bet you she's the one who decided which therapist he should go to, which ones would be the best. And these people, and again, sounds like a lot of them are from California, hippy dippy California, are leading him down a very unhealthy path, in my opinion. Because this, to me, doesn't sound healthy. You should not relieve all your trauma from getting high. That doesn't sound like the smartest move, in my opinion. The author does also say, you and William should have done it together. And I'm like, well, honey, I'm sure William heard what Harry was telling him, was like, nah, I'm not into that. Not into that. I don't think that's helpful. That's not what I meant, Harry, when I said therapy. That's not what I meant. And Harry says, and because of therapy, the way I explain it to myself is that all of the trauma, the grief, the sadness, the frustration, the anger, and that has literally been cleaned out of me. It doesn't mean I don't get angry sometimes. It doesn't mean that I don't get sad. It doesn't mean that I don't get worried. All that is still there. These very normal human emotions. But in regards to the baggage in the past, now I've cleared that out. I feel like I have a new level of awareness and consciousness to everything about me. So I wonder here if part of Harry's in the psychological place he's in right now is that he's totally repressing everything that he's done wrong to a certain extent. It's just like, well, I'm a changed person and I'm perfect now. I've gone through the initiation. I'm good reporting for duty. I have nothing, because unfortunately, the reality is if you have things in your life that are challenging, it's going to be hard for you to face those things. And sometimes it'll be hard every day. You don't totally dismiss it and go on. It's something that's in the back of your brain constantly. I feel like that is what true perhaps you could say revelation or true healing comes from, is in taking the negative things that you've done, facing them and recognizing those patterns that you developed before, and realizing some of that pain and hurt will always be there. Where I feel like Harry is also like, no, he's a Disney character walking around, the grass is greener now, everything's perfect and wonderful. And I feel like I want to say I feel invincible, but I feel like I can take on the world. And I feel like this is my life's mission. My purpose is to right the wrongs of the very thing that drove us out, because it took my mom, it took Carolyn Flack, who was my girlfriend, nearly took my wife. And if that isn't good enough reason to use the pain and turn it into purpose, I don't know what it is. Some people say you can't just leave it. And I think, no, I can't, because I know that other people are going to suffer. And again, too, I should have mentioned as well, I feel like that's part of the cult thing too, is to go, well, I'm all fixed now. I'm perfect. I'm fine. I'm sane. Everything's good and great and golden and lovely and gorgeous. And you really haven't dealt with anything, and it's just been veneered over with something else. And so at some point, though, those things, that veneer that you have on will eventually wear down. And reality will hit you in the face at some point. He says, yeah, so you didn't want to exist, and then you met Meghan. And you had an experience of, I want to live. So again, perhaps Harry struggled with that. And again, not saying that he didn't. Sometimes it takes something like that to make you realize how fundamentally unhappy you have been. He says, yeah, I was never aware of how unhappy I was. I didn't allow myself to think that. I just got on with it. I went to parties, and don't get me wrong, I had fun, but looking back on it now, it wasn't fun. It was masking something. So yeah, Meghan introduced me to a life that I never knew existed. Then enter Archie and enter Lily. He mimics a look of utter amazement. And again, I feel like Harry, again, there's this veneer over things that everything changed when Meghan came into the picture. So again, his argument that he didn't change when Meghan entered, I feel like is total BS, because again, he's telling us everything changed literally when Meghan entered the picture. That she is the one who brought light and joy and happiness, and he realized how unhappy he was. And I'm sure he was unhappy, but I don't feel like his happiness now comes from his connection to Meghan, not an internal happiness, because again, he hasn't really dealt with himself, I feel like, very well. Because again, he cannot acknowledge that he or Meghan made any single mistake. And I'm sorry, but you did have to make at least one. I feel like my mom is my guardian angel. Genuinely, when I look back at the things that have happened, instead of looking at it as punishment, I try and ask myself what I can learn from this. How is the universe schooling me, so that when it happens next time, or when something similar happens, I can be better prepared for it. And if you're trying to change an institution and fundamentally the media landscape, that is not an easy task. The scale of the challenge is enormous, and I have to be able to protect myself mentally and emotionally throughout that process. And once again, guys, the delusion of grandeur is massive. This idea that Harry's going to change the entire media landscape is lunacy on the face of it, because he does not want to change it in a good way. He wants to change it for control. He wants to change it in a way that mimics his worldview. And the good thing about the internet, the good thing about the news media is, although it is very skewed, generally left-leaning, we need all different voices at the table. And Harry doesn't want different voices at the table. He doesn't want dissenting voices like mine at the table. He doesn't want to hear anybody push back against what he says and what he believes is the truth. Because again, he knows the truth, we don't. I don't really believe anyone, usually, when they tell me that they come to me and they go, I have the truth. I'm going to have the truth that's going to change your life. Now, when it comes to my Christian faith, I believe that to a certain extent is true, but there are also auspices of that are untrue too. And so again, you have to use your discernment. You have to say, okay, what am I believing, or what are these people trying to get me to believe? So, in the Christian faith, generally, if I was trying to convert somebody, I'd say, I can share with you how salvation works, but the truth comes from the Bible. It doesn't come from me. I'm getting my truth from here. That's what I believe. And so that I am putting the burden on you. I can share with you my truth, but you have to read it from the book. You have to decide for yourself. You have to use your own judgment. Do I believe what this is telling me, or do I not believe what this is telling me? And Harry doesn't want that. He wants to tell us what he wants us to believe. He wants to tell us how to think. There might be some people think, what gives you the right to change the media? I don't think anything gives me the right, but I feel an inherent responsibility. From what I see and what I know and what I've experienced, it seems that they keep getting away with the same things again and again. And the thing that sticks with me is history repeating itself, whether it's from a family perspective or otherwise. The biggest driver for me now is the treatment of Meghan. It's affecting hundreds of millions of people around the world. Are you joking me, Harry? Hundreds of millions of people do not care. What the media is going on about with Meghan Markle has nothing to do with other people. It's about Meghan. It has nothing to do with race. It's about her. You need to get over this in your mind. But he can deflect criticism about her if he says, well, they're just racist. They're just racist. He doesn't have to face the reality if he just said, well, they're not talking the truth. I have the truth. I know my wife. So ergo, I don't need to listen to anybody else. When other people are telling you, well, she's a bully, she's difficult, she's rude, demanding, abrasive, so many different adjectives of just an obnoxious person, it sounds like. And he thinks because of that, that's somehow affecting hundreds of millions of people. The delusions of grandeur is so large, it's insane. And again, once again, from what I've experienced, what I know. Yeah, the guy who barely graduated high school, give me a freaking break. Like, I want you determining and evolving the media to what you want. No way in heck. He also says, because they feel how she has been treated very personally, especially women of color, but also women in general. No, I'm not like Meghan Markle, Harry, so yeah, I don't have any issue with that. He goes on, since 2016, it's become a national sport to literally try and destroy her. And doing it in the mainstream media, you normalize it. So it happens to everyone else. And then you have someone like Jeremy Clarkson get away with that. It becomes acceptable. So people can treat their wives, their girlfriends, and everybody else the same way. No. The criticisms about Meghan Markle are valid. There are valid criticisms. Yes, there are ones that are not. Jeremy Clarkson perhaps went too far, but I read it as an allegory, as just a general frustration of their savior complex and how they think they've done absolutely nothing wrong for their entire lives, basically, and that they are the perfect human beings. That grinds on anybody, Harry. That generally does start to annoy people after a while. Especially when all she's done is to tell us how awful the UK is, how much she hates it, how much she hates basically the people, the monarchy, everything in it, and then acts like, well, I'm perfect, I've never done anything wrong. And everybody's like, well, you've done something wrong, clearly. That again is another reason why it is completely worth it, because otherwise you're just talking about self-preservation, which, by the way, is how the whole system works, especially in my family. If I can get something out of this, if I can be protected by giving them something or trading stories or inviting them for drinks, self-preservation works for you. You found a way to protect yourself, but they're just going to move on to somebody else. Well, yeah, duh, Harry, that's how it works. Again, I don't understand. I just don't understand sometimes like what he is thinking, because what he's saying and what's going on are like two different things. So he says there are a lot of people saying that, so this is the author again, there are a lot of people saying that they feel sorry for you. They understand you have experienced awful things, but you shouldn't be airing your family's dirty laundry. Okay, Harry's things that he's experienced are not that bad compared to some people. Like, let's say Anne Frank has experienced a lot greater hardship than Prince Harry. The airing of my family's dirty laundry is a term that has been flung at me numerous times by people in the UK, by friends of mine. Yes, his friends, his like real friends are going, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? And again, he's in Fantasyland. He's in Fantasyland. And they can't wrap their heads around it. They can't comprehend it. To me, it's twofold. One is my family has been airing each other's dirty laundry for decades, especially the last 15 years. Actually, Harry, it's been longer than that because wasn't your mother the first one to air dirty laundry? I think she was. So yes, they've been airing dirty laundry for 30, 40 plus years now. Let's be honest. It's not just the last 15. The never complain, never explain thing. It's just a motto. That's all it is. And the second part of it is, if you look at it from an abuser standpoint, if there's someone in the family or someone in your life that's abusing you, then the abuser loves the silence and the ability to say, well, you can never talk about this to anybody. Is that not what Harry is doing? That he's talking, the royal family is being silent. Is he not the abuser in his own flipping scenario? He's the abuser in his own scenario. That's what he's doing. That's literally what he's doing, is he's talking knowing they can't talk back and can't fight back. That is what he's doing. So the abuser continues the abuse. It still hurts me now when people say you should never air your family's dirty laundry. But I always say, what's the difference between airing lies about your family through the British press or airing truth through a book? But it's not truth, Harry. It's not truth. It's your version of it, which is different, because this is millions upon millions of words. And in my case, it is all contained in one place where I can hold myself entirely accountable and entirely responsible for what I am saying. And then he complains that people are misinterpreting him. Once again, he doesn't even stand by his own words, because he's saying on Colbert, well, people got mad at me for saying I killed a certain number of fighters in Afghanistan and I was a war hero. How dare somebody tell that me? Don't they understand the context? And it's like, no, Harry, it had nothing to do with the context ever. But it had everything to do with that you gave it a number. That was the issue. And again, anybody can tell you in the entire world that airing your family's dirty laundry publicly generally doesn't go well. Generally doesn't go well. I arguably wouldn't have needed to do this, and I wouldn't have chosen to do this had none of this happened in the first place. Because, it's again, the guy who's saying to everyone that he's taking accountability is not taking any accountability for any role he had in the Mexit idea that him and Meghan had, which was lunacy on the face of it, again. So we'll end here. I don't see why it's so ingrained that whatever happens in your family, that you should never talk about it. That no matter what happens, I can't do this, but they can because of who they are and what they represent. The way I was brought up as a member of the royal family, especially as a senior members of the royal family, should be leading by example. You shouldn't be able to take that privilege to get away with more things. No institution is immune from criticism and scrutiny. And if only 10% of the scrutiny was put on this institution, we wouldn't be in this mess right now. It's so, he makes a guttural erg sound. It's so dirty, it's so dark. I look forward to the day when we are no longer part of it, but I worry about who's next. Well, Harry, if you no longer want to be part of it, you can officially join the cult of Meghan Markle. You can be in the California glam, doing the Montecito lifestyle, but you need to give up the title and your place in the line of succession. That's what needs to happen. You want to change the monarchy, but you're not in it anymore. And at this point, you don't even understand it. So let's be honest here. You're not the brightest bulb in the lot. So you are saying you're trying to save everybody. That type of savior complex, again, it just so reminds me of somebody in a cult. We have the answers. If only you would listen to us, we could profoundly change your lives. But it's not just that you have to listen to us, because again, yes, certain faiths definitely do that. As a Christian, I would say, hey, listen to what I have to say, but you can take it either way. No, Harry wants you to listen, and he wants you to conform to his way of thinking. He wants you to conform to the cult of Meghan Markle, which is that she's the greatest thing ever. She invented the wheel. She was perfect as a royal. She came in and did the job better than anybody ever could. Better than the Queen, better than King Charles, better than Prince Philip, better than anybody else in the royal family, because she is the savior of it. And she was going to be the savior of the Commonwealth. Again, they believed that because of Meghan Markle's skin tone, that was the sole reason that she could be the leader of the Commonwealth, basically. Because, they share skin color, shouldn't that matter? Again, it's so ludicrous, but that's what they were thinking. And again, I've given you, I hope, a lot of information and a lot of analysis and a lot of reaction to the things. And again, I just want to say, Harry and Meghan had the right to do what they want. They do. I don't fault them for it. What I do fault them for, and what I'm pushing against is this idea that they are here to save us, that they are here to give us the right answers, the correct information, so many different things, because they are the purveyors of goodness, of joy, of peace, of so many different things. And if only us in the world, if only we would bow at the feet of Meghan Markle, then we could find peace and relief and all these sorts of things. And I'm like, no, I'm not playing that game, Meghan. I'm not going to play that game with you, because I fundamentally, I don't believe it. Savior came to our planet and died for us 2,000 years ago. That's it, all done. And I mean, obviously other people have different beliefs, and that's totally fine, but that is my belief. So this idea that you're here to save us, that you're here to bring us truth, I'm sorry, but that kind of puts you in the cult mentality a little bit, and I don't agree with that. And so, Harry, I'm not buying into the cult of Meghan Markle. So on this channel, and as much as I can, I will be trying to push sometimes against your false narrative, because you need to be held to task, because we all know you aren't going to do it. So guys, thank you so much for watching, especially this uber long video. I hope it was worth it. And I appreciate you guys so much, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.